There is so much information out there that tells us how to eat. This diet that we should follow, that diet that everybody should be on, other diets, other nutritional theories, but are they really getting to the root of the matter? How we need to eat to nourish our human bodies. Today, I have the expert on the topic, and we are going to be talking with Dr. Bill Schindler. I do want to tell you just a little bit about him before we get started. So Bill Schindler is an internationally known archaeologist, primitive technologist, and chef. What a fascinating combination. He founded and directs the Eastern Shore Food Lab with a mission to preserve and revive ancestral dietary approaches to create a nourishing, ethical, and sustainable food system, and is an adjunct professor of archaeology at University College Dublin. A co-star of the National Geographic Channel series, The Great Human Race, Dr. Schindler has written features for the Washington Post, The Atlantic, and the London Times, among other publications. And one thing that you may or may not know, he is also the author of this amazing book, Eat Like a Human, which my book club and I read together and thoroughly enjoyed. Bill, thank you so much for being here.
It is truly my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I met you first at the National Association of Nutrition Professionals Conference, HEAL-Con, and listened to your talk. I was absolutely blown away when you talked about what it really means to eat like a human. And you went all the way back to like how our dental structure is formed and how our bodies have changed over the years. I know that was a 1-hour talk condensed down from a much bigger talk, but I'm going to ask you before we dive into talking about some of the fun and interesting things in the book, can you condense it down just a little bit more? Like, what are we not doing as humans that we should be?
I'll do my best, I promise. The thing we need to recognize with humans, the first thing we need to recognize is that we are a fully domesticated species. We are not a wild animal any longer. And with that comes a lot of extra needs in order to nourish ourselves and to be as healthy as we can be. So a wild animal, wild organisms in general, are perfectly designed through millions of years of evolution to eat a certain diet. Like they have everything that they need to get the nutrients from their environment. And just as importantly, they have everything they need internally to take those nutrients and turn them into something that their bodies can actually do something with. Now, we as humans are omnivores. We know this is the case, but what I think many of us fail to recognize is that we're not omnivores because we are fully designed to be omnivores. We are omnivores because we, through millions of years of technological innovation, have created technologies that allow us to overcome our physical limitations, get all sorts of nutrients from our environment that we really have no business getting anatomically, and also, just as importantly, we do something through technology to make the nutrients in the foods that we get as safe and nourishing as possible before we even put them in our mouths. And that's the part, when I say eating like a human, that's the part that's, I think, missing from a lot of the modern conversations. We have great conversations today about what we should be eating and sourcing high quality ingredients and what does organic mean and pasture raised meat and grass-fed milk from grass-fed cows, all these wonderful things that are incredibly important. But the other piece of the conversation that we really need to be engaging in as far as nourishing our bodies to the best of our ability is, what do we do with those raw materials before we put them in our mouths to make sure that they're as safe and nourishing as they can possibly be.
And I think one of the things that is so important to keep in mind, and I'm a nutrition educator. I've been in this field for a lot of years. I've helped a lot of people with chronic health issues and gut health issues and getting rid of chemicals in their diet and all that stuff. I never went back to basics. So when I heard you speak at HEAL-Con and you started with the fact that we were actually scavengers and we got all the leftover bits, like fighting with the hyenas and the vultures, and that actually, although our modern preference is for meat, that's not the best part of what we should be eating if we're consuming animal products. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's really interesting, I hope we get to talk, dive even deeper into the part we're going to talk about the second, and I hope we get to talk about sometime today about bugs. But one of the things that's really interesting about both the sort of nose to tail approach to animals, which in some circles right now is really taken off, some in a good way and some in a sort of, it's taken a little too far away. And also with bugs is that when I have a question about how to feed myself or feed my family or feed our customers here at the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, my default is to go back to the past, not necessarily to take exactly what we did maybe a million years ago and make a carbon copy of it today, because there are a lot of differences we have to take into account, but to take the way that we've approached food for millions of years and that diet that literally built us as a species, as Homo sapiens, built these bodies and built these brains as a foundation to start to then even formulate the question the right way. So yeah, as far as organ meats and things are concerned, we go back prior to about 3.5 million years ago. Our ancestors were literally eating only what they could. They were perfectly designed to get the raw materials in their environment and process those raw materials internally to the best of their ability to nourish the bodies and brains that they had. So they had no technology whatsoever. We're eating a limited amount of hyper-seasonal, hyper-local vegetables and fruits, and a whole bunch of bugs. And as far as nutrient density and bioavailability are concerned, the bugs greatly outweigh anything they're getting from the plant world, but they were eating a varied diet like that. At about 3.5 million years ago, they began to create sharp stone tools that allowed them to scavenge meat off of carcasses on the African savanna that were killed by another predator. And when they did that, they introduced meat into their diet. And actually, to be honest, a little bit of marrow. We have evidence for them cracking open bones to extract some marrow. How much of a difference this played in their diet, we're not really sure. Was this happening on a daily event or every week? Was it happening like once a month? We don't really know. But what's really curious and interesting is that for the million years that they were scavenging meat on the savanna, not much changed anatomically. The brains grew a little, the bodies grew a little, but there wasn't a whole lot of anatomical change that influx of meat supported. But what the crazy part, and the part that you're referring to, and I think is the most profound moment in our ancestral dietary past, is that about 1.5 million years after they started eating meat, they started hunting. And when they're hunting, there's a huge difference between hunting and scavenging. Scavenging, you're eating the meat that's left over on the carcass. When you're hunting, you're the predator. You have first access to whatever part of that animal you want to consume. And what we're convinced our ancestors were doing at that time is that they were playing the role of the predator, just like the other predators on the savanna were playing. They went in and gorged on the blood and the fat and the organs first. And that is where the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable parts of the animals are. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't even have to cook it, and you can get the maximum amount of nutrients from all those parts, and a huge influx of nutrients. And then, obviously, they were eating meat as well, but the blood, the fat, and the organs were, in my mind, and many other people's minds, the key, the difference that when that was introduced into our diets, it supported the massive body and brain growth that helped eventually lead Homo sapiens, or us. And the crazy thing is now we're sitting here and many of us are recognizing that the valuable role that animals can play in our diets, but many of us realize that stepping back in time to understand our dietary past is very beneficial. But as far as animals are concerned, most of us have stepped back too far. We need to go back to that 2 million year moment when we had this huge, incredible influx of incredible nutrition and bioavailable nutrition at that. And many of us are going back to 3.5 million years ago where we're just eating the meat, right? We go and we raise these beautiful animals and we harvest these animals and we butcher these animals, and only half of that animal makes it to the grocery store, and it's just the meat.
Because we're taking all the organs and the other bits and turning them into pet food.
If we're lucky, we're turning it into pet food. I was in the health food store, a local health food store, actually in the DC area, on Sunday, and I was blown away because I was walking through way too fast, and I wasn't really reading labels. I didn't even recognize what aisle I was in. And I looked up and I saw some labeling on one of the packages, and I'm like, oh my God, I want this. And then I looked up and I realized I was in the dog food aisle, and I walked around the rest of the grocery store, this is a health food store, There were no livers, there were no hearts, there
Mhm.
was nothing available for human consumption. But in the pet food aisle, I could have got probably the most nutrient dense thing in the entire.
And part of the challenge is we've been through so many dietary shifts in modern culture and gotten to a point where like we're finally beginning to redevelop that awareness that fat is healthy for us. Our bodies need fat. But for a long time, it's like, oh, fat is bad, no fat, cut off all of it. Every shred of fat needs to be gone. And then, of course, not eating organ meats. I remember as a kid, admittedly being a little grossed out. Nana had a tongue from the butcher in the refrigerator and she'd slice it up for sandwiches. And the adult me would eat it, but the kid me was like, no. And it also took me a while to learn to add organ meat back into my diet because we grow up with this theory that the meaty bit is the best bit and we don't realize the nutritional value. I will say that bugs and blood are still a little bit challenging for me. Like I've eaten blood sausage and blood pudding, but I don't think I read in the book where you and your family actually drank this mixture of, was it yak milk or buffalo milk with
No,
blood?
it was actually, it was cow milk. It was cow milk and
Oh,
cow
milk.
blood.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. Although you said it tasted chocolatey, so that's interesting.
It tasted like a salty, chocolatey, irony milkshake.
Yeah, so that's kind of funny. And then bugs, I just grew up with this very strong cultural contradiction against eating bugs. And yet everywhere I turn these days, it's like, oh, cricket flour and bugs in lollipops. What does it take to get them back into our diet?
Part of it's context. Part of it is conversations like this. So context is really important. It's when I used to teach at Washington College, even and at Monmouth University, I spent a lot of time trying to create the proper context to even engage in the right conversations with students. And I think when you're in the right context, you can let down a lot of the cultural baggage, the walls that we've put up or have been put up for us over our entire lives that is actually preventing us from having a real in-depth conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of them, we see them happening. A lot of these walls are put up and are invisible to us, but they start when we're in the high chair, right? They start when we're sitting there and I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. Think about how crazy this is and what we're teaching our kids. So we take and what we've normalized it. We take an infant human that's screaming because they're so hungry. They're not starving, but they're really hungry. We stick them in a high chair and we give them food. And we give them exactly what they're screaming for. We give them food and we start trying to feed it to them. And it's this spinach in a jar that's been whatever. And we're trying to feed it to them. And they're spitting it back up and they're screaming and they're pushing the stuff away. And we spend the next several months of their life forcing it into we play things with airplanes and spoons and games and we force it and don't let them get up until they're done. And we're literally forcing them, teaching them to not pay attention to their own senses and to pay attention to somebody else to tell them how they should be eating. And then that's reinforced by, and again, it's not necessarily that everybody has malintent here, but then other people are telling them how to eat, and we've lost that sort of our own intuition to trust our own feelings and how we feel and how we perceive food. But then we go to the grocery store, and this is a great example of the kind of conversation we're having here. We may not realize it, but most of us now are so disconnected from our food. The only place we get our food is from a grocery store, cafeteria, restaurant, where other people have been involved in the entire process. And by default, what we see on the menu becomes part of our subconscious. This is food. Like this is real food. If I walk through the grocery store and see it, it's something that I should consider food in that category. And if it's not in the grocery store, then it's probably not food, right? It's not even in our conscious of something. So when we start talking about things like liver or heart or kidneys or spleen, in most American grocery stores, you don't see them. And bugs, if you saw a bug in a grocery store, you'd probably call the health department, right? So it's not in our conscience. But and again, if I'm sitting at the table and I put at our house or a regular dinner table and put a jug of fresh blood on the table, nobody would, they'd probably call DYFUS on me. Like it's not something that's considered real food, and nobody in my family would have had it. but we created the right context. We actually were with the Samburu warriors in Kenya that eat this literally every single day. In that context, it was considered, and it wasn't even just considered, okay, this is something that I need to eat to survive. It was considered food that people looked forward to having every single day. And that wore off on us. We let down our inhibitions. And everybody in my family, but my youngest daughter, who was still upset because when they took the blood from the cow, she thought they killed the cow, which they obviously didn't. She was still upset about it. She didn't try it, but everybody else had let down their walls and actually tried it. So part of it is framing the conversation the right way. Are we going to have right now, this second, you and me, are we going to have anybody listening? Are we going to let down our inhibitions and have a real conversation about the things, the goals we're really trying to attain? How to nourish our bodies in the best possible way while also meeting our standards, our ethical standards of food, our sustainability efforts surrounding food. Is that the conversation we're going to engage in? Then if so, the modern food system is so screwed up that we have to let down all our inhibitions and actually have a real conversation. We might at the end of the day say, hey, the bugs and the blood and the whatever is not for me, but at least let's engage in a real conversation. I think that safe space to have that is actually what we need.
It's so interesting too, because listening to what you're talking about how we culturally train our younger generations to assimilate food. Several generations ago, they didn't have so many of the things that pass for baby food now. And unfortunately, what most families start with are the exploded cereal grains or fruits, things that are very sweet because we're biologically programmed to accept that sugar. And then that, I think, begins that process of shifting what our cultural preferences are, what our taste buds seek out as well, because let's be really honest, organ meat is not sweet.
No.
But it has a really wonderful, rich, nourishing flavor to it. And granted, like you said, it's not always easy to find. Typically, you have to go either to a farm directly to get it, or you have to, luckily, there are services online where you can order pasture-raised, clean, sustainable organ meat now, but it's not something that we incorporate a lot. And so changing that conversation is really difficult, because even if it starts in a household such as yours, where the kids are learning how to do that, once they go into the wider world, how do we maintain that?
Not even once then. I and Christina raised our family in a certain way and had certain foods in the house, certain foods that weren't in the house. But at the same time, our kids are, even at the same time, they're going to their friend's house, they're going to the birthday party, the movie, and it doesn't stop. And in fact, some of the things that were at least sacred when I was a kid, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and you had the influx of the candy, and you go to the movies, and all those things are there, maybe at a friend's house, but at least school and sports seem to be somewhat sacred. They were places where most of the time healthy choices were still being made. And I remember being in the middle of a soccer game in 7th grade and couldn't wait for halftime so that I could go and get the orange slices on the side. And that's a rarity now. When our kids were growing up, we had parents who were assigned snack for that day. For some reason, they got snack in the middle of the game and at the end of the game. And they were going and buying boxes of Twinkies and those sorts of things.
Juice boxes, yeah.
Juice boxes. And that's what they were giving kids at sports. So nothing is sacred as far as healthy food is concerned any longer. And that's what we're fighting against. One of the ways that I spent a lot of time trying to battle, or at least counter some of what they were getting in other places, was I realized I was competing with that. And I was literally competing with the foods that were coming out from the modern food industry, where the food manufacturers were spending millions of dollars so that people in lab coats could tweak flavors and textures and aromas so that they were addictive and they tasted a certain way. And here I am in my kitchen trying to learn how to make cheese and then trying to serve that to the kids. And I'm battling what's coming out of Domino's or somewhere else. So I realized that I needed to do my best to make sure that not only the food is as nourishing as it can be, which is important, but if it's actually going to get into the kids' mouths and they're going to eat it the second time that I give them and it's going to continue, then it also had to look good and it also had to taste good. And I spent a large part of my at least parenting life, focused on that. And the cool thing is it can be done. In fact, you should be able, nourishing food is, we are pre-programmed to eat nourishing food and feel nourished. It is part of what we do. It's an evolutionary co-evolving mechanism that's happened. It makes complete sense. So you should be able to make incredibly nourishing food, and it should taste absolutely delicious, and you shouldn't have to fight anybody to eat it. It's just, there's a couple of tweaks, a couple of things that we can do in our kitchen to help make that happen.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love too, in the back of the book, you talk about the fact that, yes, we obviously do well to want to nourish the body, to want to support ourselves and make sure that we're getting the things that we need that are best for us. But there is also that emotional component and that cultural component. And it's okay to have birthday cake once in a while.
It is. It is. I struggle with that. So the last chapter of the book on sugar was the hardest one for me to write, because my relationship with sugar is still evolving, and I'm trying my best to understand what the healthiest form of that relationship should be. But I realized I needed to put it in there because it's something that so many of these books and nutritional advice, it's, and even Instagram influencers now, it's so dogmatic. You need to do this, and if you fall off the bandwagon and eat one carb, you're like out of the club. And I don't think that's healthy either. There's definitely benefits, tremendous benefits to eating most of your life, most of your day in a certain way and adhering to these things. But there's also a negative effect if it's 100%, and if you feel like you fall off the bandwagon, that everything is lost. Then, and that's the cycle I was in so much in my life. I think it was Mindy Peltz. I think it was Mindy Peltz who said, you don't have, I'm the kind of, let me back up. I'm the kind of person, it used to be, if I fell off the bandwagon and ate something bad, done for the day. Like my mind completely checked out. And if it was within sight, I ate it. And I'll start again tomorrow, sort of thing. And she said, you shouldn't have a cheat day, but a cheat meal is okay. And in your mind, that really helped me quite a bit, that if I have something, okay, got it. You know what, maybe I'll have a couple more bites of it. But the end of that is at the meal level. Yeah. Like when I'm done eating that meal, then I'm back ready to go. And that saved me like 23 hours of eating bad on a regular basis, and was hugely transformative for me.
And I think there's two things that come to mind with that. So I call what you were talking about 3-cookie syndrome when I'm working with my clients. So 3-cookie syndrome is where the package says eat 2 cookies, and you eat that 3rd cookie, and then you go, oh, what the hell? And you finish the package of Thin Mint.
For me, it's Oreos. I got it.
Yeah. And the thing is to recognize that sometimes those things happen, to figure out why that happened, like to really connect into the emotional language of our food. Because one of the things that I tell everybody that I work with is, first of all, every single human on the face of this planet is an emotional eater, some to more degrees than others. But the truth of the matter is, when you were an infant and you cried, somebody put something in your mouth that filled your belly, made you feel better, and it made a positive connection. We are all emotional eaters. And however, the goal is to learn to connect into what those emotions are, why we're eating certain things, or why we're tapping in to some of the things that we're doing. And then the other thing that I think is really important, what you were referring to, is something called orthorexia, where you have to be so tightly controlled in what you're eating. And if it's not in that perfect environment, man, it's not good. So it limits you from eating out or enjoying food with other people or those kinds of things. And so I love that you actually included the story about the birthday cake. And because it is important. There are times when we eat for celebration, and we're eating, that's nourishing us on a different level. And that's a really important part of being human also.
It is. I'm so glad you bring that up. And it took me years to figure that out. It really is important. That's the other piece, I think, of when I say eating like a human, the one for kind of technological nitty gritty part of it is we need to realize that we have our biological nutritional needs can only be met through the application of certain technologies that allow us to get nutrients from our environment and transform them into their safest and most nourishing form possible before we eat them. And that there's no doubt in my mind that is incredibly important. But the other part of it is, like you said, we are emotional leaders. We are, and food is so intricately wrapped up in everything that we are, how we view the world, how we view ourselves. It's part of our identity. And whether it's family tradition or politics or socioeconomic status or where you live in the world or what age you are, or whatever, every time, I'm convinced that every time we take a bite of food, we're conveying all those things to the world around us. All of those things play a role in how we purchase our food, how we get our food, how we cook our food, how we eat our food. So you can't separate those things. You can't say all these things are important to me, but I'm only going to eat completely for my biology. I'm going to ignore all that and eat only my macronutrients and micronutrients that I need and expect to be fully nourished. That doesn't work for humans. You have to incorporate all of it at the same time. And one thing that I started saying a few years ago that I think is really important is one of our goals should be, as far as food is concerned, that every time you get up from a table after you're done eating, you feel better than when you sat down. And that's what nourishment's all about, right? And I know that sounds so, why would anybody even need to say that? Of course that's the case. But if you really reflect on, anybody listening, if you really reflect on times you've gotten up from the table the past couple of days, the past weeks or months, how many times do you actually feel better? And when I say feel better, I just don't mean internally, like you shouldn't feel overstuffed like it's Thanksgiving. You shouldn't feel hungry. You should feel satiated and nourished, but also and culturally, that all of those, everything should have felt nourished. Was it good conversations around the table? Did you sit there long? All those things should play a role in it. And if that's your goal, then the health and the living your best life literally just follow along. But that really should be our goal.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And I think one of the important things about that is having things like your book. And then also, I know you and your family run a restaurant, you teach cooking classes. So can you share a little bit about how people could connect with you to better learn how to eat like a human?
Sure. So I've had an incredibly unhealthy relationship with food my entire life up until the past 15 years or so. And me trying to learn what I'm teaching now and doing now and food that I'm making now started with me trying to make myself healthy. But really when I got married and then when Christina and I started having kids and had our own family, it became even more important because now I'm worried about, it's more important than just me. Now I'm trying to nourish other people that I love. And so that book is a culmination of the best of what we've learned over the past 15 years. And to write that book, I dove deep. It was a lot of archaeological research, a lot of ethnographic research, a lot of work with food producers and chefs and amazing people all over the world. And that's what it took for me to start to answer that question. How can I nourish myself and how can I nourish my family? And what we found is several years ago, like, oh my gosh, this is actually working. Like we're on to something. We certainly don't have all the answers, but I think we're at least asking the right questions and start at least knocking on the door of some of these questions that we have, how to answer them. And we wanted to just share it with the world and with as many people as possible. Our number one goal, me, Christina, our entire family, is to empower people to nourish themselves and their families in the best possible way that they can. So that book is one way. So Eat Like a Human was one example of how we're trying to do it. And then the other is teaching classes. Our goal, like I said, is to empower people to do this themselves, or at least arm themselves with enough information that if they're not going to make the food from scratch, they at least can listen to their own instincts and buy the food, that they understand how the modern food production world works so they can walk into a grocery store and at least know what to buy. And the best possible way to do it, the best education. I have a PhD in archaeology. This is a long story, but it took me 10 years to get my undergrad. I think I may have more undergraduate classes than anybody living in the world right now. 10 full years of being an undergrad. So I've been exposed to a lot of information, a lot of educators, a lot of amazing teachers, but the best education as far as food is concerned was one that I gave myself by getting into the kitchen and actually learning how the food that me and my family eat every day is made entirely from scratch. So in an ideal world, everybody learns how to make their own food and they do it all. But I realize that is possible for so many people for so many reasons. And some people might just not want to do that. But if you want to walk into the grocery store and be immune to the billions of dollars of advertising and marketing that you're hit with when you're trying to understand what to get off the shelf and put in your cart, and even the product placement, the amount of money and time spent on product placement in grocery stores, so it's at eye level and you grab that one as opposed to another one, it will blow your minds.
Colors, shapes, everything. I know it's horrible. And I think the thing that disgusts me the most about that is they spend, like you said, tens of millions of dollars to figure out what are the buzzwords, what are the colors, what are the shapes, what are the things that will attract us. And then they take a hands-off approach by going, oh, it's not our responsibility. It's your responsibility to learn
100%.
how to do it yourself. It's so annoying.
So one of the things that I love about the way that we teach our cooking classes is it starts 100% from scratch always. Our cheese making class starts with milk. All of our sourdough bread classes start with how to capture wild yeast and wild bacteria, and with flour. All the butchering classes completely from scratch. So if you learn how the food is made, again, ideally in a great world, you're making all that stuff from scratch. But even if you don't, by going through these courses the way that we have them set up, is when you walk into the grocery store and you go to buy that food that you now know how it's really genuinely made in a traditional, nourishing way, you then start to become immune to all those billions of dollars of advertising and product placement, and at least know you can make your best selection of that actual food prepared by somebody else. And the two huge takeaways from that are, number one, you're getting the best product, the most nourishing product to feed your family with. And number two, just as important, you're using your hard-earned money to support the food producers that are actually doing a very good job. So we have a lot of online classes, some pre-recorded, some live virtual. And I'm coming to you right now from our teaching kitchen upstairs. We have a huge teaching kitchen here at the Eastern Shore Food Lab in Chestertown, Maryland, where we run in-person classes all the time. And again, on just about any topic on how to make the food that you eat every day entirely from scratch. But what we're also incredibly proud of is downstairs, we have our foodery restaurant called the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. We've literally put that book into practice. Just about every recipe from that book formed the foundation for what we create there. And if you want to come, you don't want to make the food yourself, you want to come here and get it. So here's some of the things we stand on. Number one, we don't use any refined nut or seed oils. We focus on animal fats. We have a couple of fruit oils. We have olive oil and avocado oil. The only nut oil that we use is coconut. And any of those oils we don't heat. We only use in cold applications, except for a little bit of olive oil on one of the breads, but that's it. So we cook in animal fat. We fry in animal fat. Any grains have been processed to make them as safe and nourishing as possible. So wheat's gone through a full sourdough process. All the maize has been nixtamalized. We practice a complete nose to tail butchering approach with our animals. We make there's no two ingredients put together outside of our walls. And it's not that it's just these crazy food things. Like, you're not going to come here and drink a glass of blood. You're going to come here and you're going to be hit. We make pizzas every Friday. It takes us a week to make the pizzas, but it's all sourdough crust, all homemade cheese from local milk that we make in-house. All the meats are made in-house, those sorts of things. And so we're trying to take everyday foods that people are familiar with, turn them into their safest and most nourishing form possible, and provide that for our customers.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Obviously, I need to show up on a Friday sometime and have pizza.
Tacos on Thursday, pizzas on Friday, lunches during the week. So yeah, you definitely have to come.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for chatting. This has just been fascinating. And for anybody who wants to learn more, obviously you have to read the book, Eat Like a Human. And I will put links down below to the Eastern Shore Lab and Modern Stone Age Kitchen and all of that. But Bill, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your passion, and your wisdom with us. It was really great to talk with you.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, folks, for joining us. And we'll be back soon. So make sure you click like and subscribe down below.